something a little bit earlier, which I think is an important point, is that there is a degree of uncertainty when launching an incentive program. What's the uptake going to be? How much is this going to cost us? How do we actually budget for this? So I think I'll pose the next question to you, Kenneth, and again, of course, Laura, Alli, to jump in. Is that given that uncertainty in terms of predicting success and how much it's going to cost, how do you advise companies to justify that business case? How do they budget for it, and how do they plan and structure these programs or get approvals for those programs? Kenneth, this one's for you, and I think you might be on mute.
Thanks, Margaret. Yes, indeed, I was. Yeah, so in terms of incentives, the budgeting piece, I suppose, is not too bad, because generally you pay out incentives on business, right? So if it's, as I call it, it's kind of a win-win. But incentives play a key role in creating competitive advantage and making sure partners gravitate towards your solution over other choices, right? So most partners will work with multiple vendors, and if you don't have a good incentivization strategy, they'll go elsewhere. They kind of expect it almost at this stage. It's quite competitive in terms of incentives in the channel. So in going back to the budgeting question, as you design your overall program, and sometimes it's even where you get help, or it's a finance function, is to build that margin in. You know what your margin is, and you know what you're going to give up to the channel, and that could be whether you go through distribution or you're going tier one. All of that kind of margin analysis has to be done. So most companies, as they build out their overall program, they'll have your tiers, for example, what discounts you're going to give on the front end, and then what makes up the rest of the margin you're going to give away to your partners. And that's obviously very important. It's your margin, it's your business, but you got to remember, as you put yourself in a partner's shoes, they have to run a business, and in all good partnerships, both companies are successful. So kind of keep that in mind, because often you start working with a finance function and they'll say, well, why are you giving away a margin? But remember, the immediate answer to that is, well, I'm not going to get to that end customer business without the partner. So while I might give up some margin, it's better to give up some margin and get something than nothing at all. Basically, that's kind of your starting point. So whatever that overall margin you're going to give up, typically it's whatever we say 42% is going to be. You have higher margins on software businesses. You will build an element of margin in for your rebates. So, and often vendors have multiple rebates. You might have a growth rebate, you might have a net new logo rebate, you might have rebate for training, and so on and so forth. It could be a mix of multiple rebates, and as vendors get larger, they definitely will have a mix of rebates. So partners can be getting paid across multiple rebates at any given time, right? So again, now it starts to get a little bit more complex, and this is really where automations and systems come into play to be able to help you calculate what it is you're willing to give up. But also, when you go to run those programs, how do you manage the automation of your incentive programs to keep a track on? It's like an accrue. What am I on the hook to pay out on any given week, as I maybe load my sales data from my channel, whether I load my bookings data from my CRM system, etc., however you drive that. And that in turn then will provide you with the ability to track the ROI, or the return on investment of that program, to make sure those incentives are doing what it is that you wanted them to do in the first place. Winning that competitive mind share in the channel, getting partners to have you as first preference to sell your solutions into their end customers, which is ultimately what you want. But I often say this, there's a lot of moving parts to ensure the successful execution of an incentive program, because that incentive program could have multiple rebates, it could have spiffs, etc. So kind of managing and measuring all of that at the same time in a moving channel can be complex, and that's kind of where a platform approach comes into play. And as the old saying goes, you can only manage what you measure, etc. So in terms of justifying it, Margaret, there's some of the key reasons, and then obviously the partner engagement piece will ultimately determine whether it's a success or a failure. Are you getting traction with that incentive? Is it doing what you wanted it to do? And again, this kind of comes back to the earlier point Laura made, is Do you have that dashboard? Do you have that reporting that not only the partner can see, but also you as a vendor internally? And this is kind of where we put a lot of work into with our customers, is giving them an internal view. How is that program running on any given day? What partners have logged in? What transactions have they done? What rebate are they owed? How many have qualified for spiffs, etc.? Building that kind of dashboard. So if I'm now an account manager and I manage, 20 partners, I need to be able to have my finger on the pulse and see how are those partners performing against those programs. Is that program being successful? Is it doing what I wanted it to do? So yeah, that's Margaret, there's a lot there, but they're some of the, I suppose, the key points.
Thanks, Kenneth. Laura, Alli, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just say, as as you're trying to design these, they're only as good as when they hit the market, and you have to be able to be flexible and almost in real time as you're going through the quarter. If you're seeing things that are not working, or if you need to make slight adjustments, we want to make sure that the incentives are driving the results that we want, but we also don't want it to be seen as a disincentive. Because if you have a category group or a business group that is saying, we want 20% growth quarter over quarter, and it's unrealistic, you will set yourself up for failure. So you want to make sure that you're growing the programs, or the programs, when you're designing them, have realistic targets, and that you can actually make it feel that your partners have the ability to achieve it with a stretch. But you're making sure that if your idea of what a stretch is versus theirs, and you start to see, as you're tracking these through the quarter, that it's not making the mark, be flexible, be able to make some changes to make sure you're still driving the demand and the growth, which you are then, you've already budgeted for. And so typically when you're creating these programs, you're paying on growth. So they're incremental sales, so that those incremental sales actually help fund where you're getting to. So I would just say that, you need to be able to take that into consideration.
That's a really, really good point. That you wouldn't be getting this revenue if we weren't incenting, right? That's the argument internally. And I've seen it before myself. There's like unrealistic targets. So you're right. It's a disincentive, and it just you just don't get the traction or uptake then. Alli, anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to double down on that incremental business piece. And I think that really helps to kind of build that case internally for the C-level execs, is understanding like this is an achievement of above and beyond the target that we had already set. If it's a realistic stretch goal, then it's easier to justify like this is incremental business than what we had initially planned for them. We're paying them out. And like Kenneth mentioned, if you can budget for it out of your margin initially and just kind of anticipate that, that will help kind of build that business case. I would also say something that we're focused on for some of those larger investments is really honing in on key focus partners to make sure that those investments are going to the partners that are reciprocating the partnership, and we're investing in them building their business together with us, which also helps, I think, in building a case. And then I would just also amplify what Kenneth mentioned about, the importance of measurement and tracking of performance. Once you have, a track record of incremental performance and continued growth, it makes that conversation easier every single time. So I would say, yeah, measurement is key, and having a mechanism to do that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, I think let's go to